Is AI the initiator for, a real next generation of drugs discovery and drugs development and drugs manufacture?
Quality systems are in some way a compensation for our lack of understanding of what's going on in the process.
That's probably one of the areas which has one of the best opportunities to harness the power of artificial intelligence going forward.
Regulation is about trust at the end of the day.
Very human quality.
At the moment, there's no feedback loop.
Part of the problem is people not getting together. Hello, my name is Bryden Wood. I'm here today with Adrian Porta to talk about an event we have coming up, an Accelerate event at 101 Euston Road on the 25th of November, which is about the role of artificial intelligence in drug manufacturing. We've got a stellar cast of people coming to discuss the subject, and really that's a reflection of the fact that it's an interest to so many people. Because it's a subject close to our hearts, which is how we, the rate limiting step that manufacturing presents in the introduction of drugs to, the good of society. So we're going to look at all the changes that might be necessary and the differences in the way we think about it that are going to be required if this is actually going to be, we're going to accelerate this process for the benefit of all. So to that end, I'm going to ask Adrian a few questions around this subject, because this is a subject that I've been involved in this for probably 15 years, but Adrian much longer, maybe 25 years in the subject area. So process and design and optimization. So one of the questions is how can we bridge the gap that's traditionally existed between drug development, the drug development process, and the industrialisation of those drugs. So I think, believe that drug development is going to accelerate by the use of artificial intelligence. There's been a lot of investment. Some of it hasn't come to fruition yet. There's been a number of articles about this, but it's coming. And there will inevitably be an acceleration. Now, of course, that's a fantastic thing, unless we actually can't respond to it from a manufacturing perspective. What are your thoughts on that, Adrian?
Well, I guess I'll start by talking about the event a bit more, because we have people from big tech, from big pharma, from the biotech AI sector as well, both from academia and innovative companies in the Knowledge Quarter. And the reason I mention that is because we're trying to find out the answers to those sort of questions at the event. So I'm very much looking forward to discovering more from that assembled knowledge and expertise we're going to get on the day. So the premise for the event, as you said, was there's an expectation that AI in drug development is going to feed more new molecules, new products into the manufacturing pipeline, which is the area we're more familiar with. But it's not clear to us at the moment how manufacturing is going to cope with an increased number, rate or level of sophistication of drugs coming from this AI-fueled development pipeline.
I think right at the heart of that is how quality evolves. So the whole subject of quality in drugs manufacture, how that evolves, and that's probably one of the areas which has one of the best opportunities to harness the power of artificial intelligence going forward, I suspect.
Yeah, I think it's widely acknowledged that life sciences hasn't grasped AI certainly in manufacturing as quickly as some other sectors, and that's understandable because of the highly regulated environment that we're used to working in. But as you say, the potential for AI and advanced control systems to actually improve quality is clear. Perhaps the challenges around the ways of working, the paradigms, the culture that we're all used to within manufacturing.
But there's a bit of a conundrum in the sense that regulatory frameworks and quality frameworks are quite static. And this is obviously a very dynamic situation and getting increasingly so.
I think you can look at this at a couple of levels. I think at the manufacturing level, at a more detailed level, we've all got used to the idea of quality being about making things static and locked in and regular and repeatable, and that's the paradigm we work in. But and there's another way of looking at it, perhaps, where you go, well, actually, to know that a particular batch of a drug product is good quality. So in this paradigm I've just talked about, we say, well, we always do it the same way. We measure the same parameters. We take a sample, we run it through a standard method. It's all about standardization and keeping things the same. So, but in reality, our understanding of what's going on in the process and what's happening in that tank is actually very poor, because we're looking at a few data points, and the way we lock things down is an antidote to our lack of understanding of what's going on, in the equipment, in the process. So if you can look at quality perhaps in a completely different way and go, well, if I really knew what was going on, I would know exactly the quality of every step in the process from having vast amounts of data which we can gather from the plant, and really correlate quality with performance in real time. It's a completely different way of looking at quality, and I think it's actually a better way of looking at it. But it requires a complete reversal of our mindset.
I mean, I guess that starts really in the sense that in drug development, because we've always found the gulf between drug development and industrialisation.
Yeah.
Sort of an interesting area for potential change and improvement. I mean, the introduction of continuous small molecule drugs manufacture in terms of first intent by drug development was maybe 20, 25 years ago. And yet we still don't see more than really pilot plants using continuous processing. And that's largely because it was almost, I mean, it wasn't as simple as this, but it was almost like someone didn't tell manufacturing it was coming. Slightly flippant, but it wasn't ready really for how the drugs were being developed. And if it had been, then it probably would have led to higher efficiencies already. So on that basis, understanding how much monitoring there can be of a process and how dynamic that can be, as opposed to locking in a static recipe effectively.
Yeah, and I think the continuous manufacturing is a good example, because for continuous manufacturing to work, you have to have a better understanding of how your process works, which is perhaps why it's been so resisted. As going back to what I was just saying, the quality systems are in some way a compensation for our lack of understanding of what's going on in the process. And when we try to move to continuous, we have to do more investigation. We have to understand how things work better, and you can extend that thinking to the whole of manufacturing. We've seen an example recently on a project, for instance, in inspection, final inspection of sterile products, and that's really interesting, because it's an AI-powered system that's going into manufacturing in commercial now. It's increasing yield and increasing quality, so it shows that it can be done.
Well, that's quite interesting, because that's augmentation of an existing system.
Yeah,
which is a great thing.
yeah.
But one of the questions is the existing system quite fit for purpose? Controversial discussion, but maybe if there was some changes to the basic framework structure of quality regulation, then it would stop only being able to be implemented in pocket areas where it's just augmenting the quality control.
Yeah, I said earlier there's maybe two levels of looking at this, and I was talking about the manufacturing level, and the sort of the higher level, the more systemic level, is thinking about how how AI might change the relationship between manufacturing, development, and use of, and medicine, if you like, use of the drugs in the population, because we might see an explosion in the amount of data that we get from people using the drugs that we're manufacturing. And at the moment, there's no feedback loop, or the feedback loop is extremely slow. So, you know,
it's strange in this day and age of wearable technology.
Well, exactly. Wearable tech, you know, diagnostics. If we, at the moment, you know, we do a clinical trial on a limited population. We look at the results, and then the drug goes out into the world. There is post-launch monitoring, but you know, you could see, or maybe the challenge is, how do you use that data in the future to feed back into manufacturing in you know, not quite real time maybe, but on much faster loops.
And these are the kind of things that we're hoping to sort of begin to hypothesize. There are no answers to these things yet, but the point is, there's a whole range of people that don't necessarily normally coincide in their normal lives required to make those kind of things happen. And that's kind of what this event has as its strength, is it's got a number of different areas, as you said, from big tech through to drugs manufacture being represented. So those are some of the more radical things that possibly we could hypothesize. The other thing about it, of course, is that, you know, drugs manufacture at the moment is quite a personnel intensive process, quite a significant amount of labor and maintenance and equipment, reliability issues in the process. And of course, again, I think one of the things that's going to come through here is the more data you have and the more monitoring you do, the more you can affect this process, and more artificial intelligence can actually start to improve those points. But it's not just about the drug itself; it's also about the equipment and the facilities and so on which they exist, making that modifying those feedback loops so that we get a much higher availability. We get better OEE from our processes, which is extremely important given the kind of investment that goes into these facilities in the first place.
One of the themes here, I think, is the way that the use of these type of systems starts to break down the barriers between different parts of the whole development, manufacturing, use sequence, and make the whole thing more integrated. But so one of the things is, how do you, when you transfer a product from chemical development or through the development process into manufacturing, that we haven't spoken about, is the use of simulation and digital twins. So you know how your drug's going to scale up, you know how your drug's going to perform in the factory before you ever do that physically. So you're using it's a bit of an overused term, the digital twin, but being able to predict how things are going to operate before you do it in the physical world is going to be very powerful. Because again, at the moment, the way we do things is when we put things into the plant for the first time, it is kind of guesswork, you know, put it in, see what happens, which is what makes commissioning so exciting. But also, once we're up and running, as you were saying, we have to understand how plants going to be perform over time. So things like predictive maintenance, real-time monitoring are already there, but you layer on artificial intelligence on top. You'll know exactly when to change a pump seal, or when to look at modifying the parameters in a control loop. So all that's going to increase efficiency and turnaround times. And
I guess one of the other really interesting subjects is going to be automation and robotics, which of course, you know, don't be confused directly with artificial intelligence, but there's obviously going to be a very synergistic. You could argue that a lot of traditional facilities are designed around people and the way and the ergonomics of people. And one has to question whether that's necessarily the way forward, because actually some of the equipment's been sized and the whole of the process has been sized around, you know, dispensing things into a vessel, levels of a building where you can reach parts of the process, when in actual fact, many of those things could be more autonomous. They could be more robotically driven material handling processes within, and that may in fact change the paradigm with regards to the whole scale of manufacturing in the first place, because one of the issues with manufacture is that, generally speaking, it has to suffer, you referred to it as the excitement of commissioning, it's had to suffer the scaling up process from at least from a pilot plant, which is fraught with potential difficulties, and could cause a drug to fail. It may change one's whole approach to the speed of the manufacture. And if you could automate the material handling characteristics and break this sort of idea that this is a batch by batch person material handled kind of process.
Yeah, I think there's obviously automation is useful, and automation is getting more reliable. But I think it's always a mistake to try and take the sort of human-centric process and just automate it. The sort of the ultimate end of that is
people-shaped
androids,
robots,
basically, just picking up the keg and pouring it in. So, but the tying it back to what we were saying earlier, part of the reason that we have batch manufacturing of a certain size is the idea of the static control of quality. So if we look at small molecule, for instance, we have a paradigm where we do a chemical synthesis step and we isolate it as a dry powder. And that's partly because we don't understand what would happen, or we're worried how complex it is if you just take the synthesis from step to step without isolating it. So your whole architecture of manufacturing is driven by this idea of having to have batches and isolation at a size that people can deal with, at a rate of analysis that people can take something off to the lab and read a result and put it in the log the lab book. So all that goes away potentially if you're able to extract data, analyze it, and with high degrees of assurance understand what's going on in the process. So it becomes much more.
You mentioned people many times, very people-centric. One of the issues there really is that I think that's one of the things that reassures us as the general public, is that it is so people-centric. But the question is that right way in the future? So you could hypothesize that the manufacture of drugs should be a less people-centric process. And what are the implications of that?
Yeah, I suppose regulation is about trust at the end of the day, and the people are taking
very human quality.
are taking drugs. They want to know that they are safe.
So there is a very deep philosophical issue that this will that artificial intelligence, I think, will provoke within people, and I think we need to consider that in the background. We consider these more.
I imagine it's a discussion that comes up in the application of artificial intelligence in every field. At what point do you lose control?
It's just particularly pointed when it comes to.
So we have to think about AI as a human enhancement, and not to get to the point, well, I pressed the button, the drug came out the other end, but I have no idea what happened in between.
No, absolutely.
That's not really where we want to end up.
One thing that it should be able to do seamlessly, and as we talked about some of the different parties involved in the Accelerate, is bring some of the areas of pharmaceutical companies where they operate, bring them together in a more continuous digital process. So the actual supply chain, and also even the strategic decisions that are made upon the investment into different drugs are somewhat disconnected traditionally. They're not necessarily holistic processes where they're all considered as from cradle to grave simultaneously. And I think one of the things that artificial intelligence, just the whole digital world, but very much more artificial intelligence could help with is creating this much more end-to-end integrated process from strategy through to supply chain, through to manufacturing, and through to healthcare, in fact, into the healthcare environment.
Exactly.
So it's a question of how does that need a new kind of backbone to it, effectively, is one of the questions I suppose we'd like to consider.
Yeah, I was listening to something about some of the vaccine development, and what it was, this was Emma Walmsley from GSK was talking about this, about how using large amounts of data with the help of AI could help target clinical trials to much more precise populations, which means that you can your chances of getting a successful clinical trial are higher because you've targeted the right population, which isn't cheating. It's just finding the right drug for the right people.
And
It's,
it sounds like it from a layman's perspective, but in fact it's not.
It's sort of the other side of that thing we've talked about for a long time about personalization of medicine. Why put somebody into a clinical trial that you've through analysis found out wouldn't benefit from that drug anyway? It doesn't make sense. But it is a case of integration of sort of the healthcare monitoring with the drug development process. If you think about influenza, that's a sort of extreme example, because every year you have to make a new product. It's and people will be quite familiar with that. And
you have to have large areas of drug plants laying dormant until they might have to increase demand for a drug overnight.
And it's not that effective either.
Well, and it's incredibly poor. It's incredibly poor financial model for pharmaceutical companies, because who wants that kind of peaky manufacturing?
So I suppose what we're saying is that there's this ability to deal with very large amounts of data in relatively short periods of time opens up the possibility of a much more effective targeted pharmaceutical industry.
I mentioned it earlier, but do you think this will generally enhance the opportunity for continuous manufacturing to become a bigger player in the drugs, synthesis of drugs in the future? Because it has had a somewhat full start really in manufacturing, and I think that's largely because it's come across some of the paradigms we talked about before, which is the people-centric nature of it, of the manufacture thus far, the scale of manufacture being related to people, which continuous manufacture doesn't have anything to do with.
The short answer is yes, but I would generalize it into more intensified or more efficient manufacturing.
I mean, accepting the fact that many stages still will never be able to be continuously.
It might not be the right thing. So one of the models we'd looked at was scaling things down to the point where you've effectively got a robotic laboratory scale process, because some of these high potency drugs, the amount that you need is only in the tens of kilos per year. So
I mean, obviously a byproduct of that might be the smaller facility where you can place the facility in let's say a politically better network strategy, because there are obviously challenges going forward in terms of the global supply chain. And wish for onshoring and so on of certain drugs. It might be that facilities can actually be rather more agile and be perhaps smaller and perhaps more population targeted than they are.
You can certainly go for a distributed manufacturing model. And again, come back to this theme of breaking down barriers between different stages. If you end up with a manufacturing process which is at lab scale and distributed, how much difference is there between that and the development process anyway? Are they going to merge? And if you're taking real-time data from the patient population and altering your drug in response to that, which I admit is very, very out there compared to our current system, then development and manufacturing start to look like the same thing.
Interesting. So one of the things that I guess one of the things is AI the initiator for a real next generation of drugs discovery and drugs development and drugs manufacture. Are we going to be able to put together a new era of drugs manufacturing? Is this kind of what we're looking for? Because it's quite interesting. Some of these initiatives existed before, and one that springs to my mind is what they call fourth generation small modular nuclear reactors, very popular in public consciousness. But actually, what actually happened was investment happened in an incredibly dispersed, diverse manner, and you ended up with literally hundreds of different potential solutions to the same problem, which was great in one sense, but it rather diluted the investment into new nuclear and made it, one might argue, didn't forward the cause of it as well as it possibly could. So part of the problem is people not getting together and finding a kind of platform or a backbone or a sufficiently coherent, I suppose, approach where what each party would do would reinforce the outcome of the other. So I wonder whether that's in a world which is as competitive as pharmaceutical, whether it's possible actually to get at least the knowledge, the backbone of the knowledge, to be rather more focused than it might be, and therefore the investment to be rather more targeted and effective than it might otherwise be.
Yeah, I think there's a balance, isn't there? Because coherence is the enemy of diversity, and you're at risk of picking winners.
Yes,
but I think there's plenty of examples of where things like common standards, working together with regulators.
Dilemma, that, isn't it? Really,
yeah,
it's a fantastic dilemma of that picking winners. But at the same time, then just making it far too dispersed, the effort.
But I think there's plenty of scope, if you like, for areas where drug manufacturers, medicine companies, healthcare, and regulators would want to work together to establish, common standards. And this happens all the time, doesn't it, in regulated environments, whilst allowing the innovators to work within a framework. And again, there's another spectrum of you make it too restrictive and you limit innovation. If you make it too lax, then you lose public trust in drug regulation.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and the public trust, as we mentioned before, the trust word. AI promotes suspicion from that perspective, right from the offset. So I guess it has to be. I mean, again, reason for having an event like this is to get that thinking started and to get it to be coherent and to get it to cross the boundaries that don't normally get crossed.
Absolutely, and so maybe that's I'm very much looking forward to the event and
absolutely
hope to learn a lot more.
And as you can
about the questions.
Well, as you can hear from this, we've got a lot more questions than we have answers at the moment. So what we'd really like to do is to at least start engender more combined critical thinking across a broad group of people, and see if we can get some hypothesis of how one might go forward, and then, if nothing else, just promote those kind of collaboration that might not already exist and needs to exist in the future.